Manifest someone specific? Neville's answer made the room go silent. Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard taught that the one you long for is never outside your own imagination. And tonight that teaching is going to meet you exactly where you live, in the quiet ache of wanting someone specific to come back, to notice you, to choose you, to text you, to love you the way you have already imagined 1,000 times in the dark. There is a verse tucked into the 2nd chapter of Genesis, and it reads, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." That is the whole of it, straight from the book of Genesis, chapter 2. And Neville Goddard would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The wife in this verse is not a woman walking around outside of you somewhere. The wife is a state. Cleaving means to be joined so tightly that two become one, and becoming one flesh has nothing to do with two bodies standing side by side. It has everything to do with your consciousness marrying a feeling until there is no seam left between you and it. So when you long for someone specific, you have already been leaving your father and your mother, which is your old identity, your old story of lack. But you have been trying to cleave to a person instead of a state. And that reversal is the exact thing that keeps you starving in the very room where your feast has already been set. And notice how quietly this mistake hides itself. You do not feel like you are doing anything wrong. You feel like you are simply loving someone, simply wanting them, simply hoping. But underneath that ordinary longing sits a very old confusion. The confusion of chasing the shadow instead of turning toward the light that casts it. You are not the only one who has knelt at this particular altar. Nearly everyone who has ever loved has, at some point, mistaken the outer face for the inner feeling and spent years exhausted, pleading with a face that could never, by itself, give them what they were actually asking for. So before we go any further, let's plant something true in you right now. Say it with me. I am worthy of the love I have been wanting. I am already united in feeling with the one I desire. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am worthy of the love I have been wanting. I am already united in feeling with the one I desire. Imagination creates my reality. If something in you just settled a little when you said that, type the words "it's done" in the comments right now. Not as a wish, but as a seal on what you have just assumed. Let those two quiet words be the doorway you walk through before the keys open even wider. The first key is this. The person you want is never the true object of your manifesting. The person is only ever a state. And I want you to feel the weight of that for a moment. Picture a young woman sitting with her phone face up on the table, refreshing it every few minutes, waiting for one particular name to appear on the screen. She believes the name is what she is after, but Neville Goddard would tell her gently, "No, what you are after is the feeling that name gives you when it appears, the warmth, the being chosen, the being seen, and that feeling is a state of consciousness you can occupy right now." With the phone dark and silent on the table in front of you, this is the actual mechanics of how imagination creates reality. You are not manifesting a human being. Human beings are free. Imagination does not enslave another person's will. What you are manifesting is a state, and states belong to you. They are yours to enter any hour you choose. So it is not the person you need to chase. It is the state of being loved you need to move into. And here is where sincere people quietly go wrong. They think love, so they picture a face, a name, exact words on an exact screen, and they cling to the outer shape instead of the inner warmth. But Neville Goddard taught that you are not your state. You move into states the way you might walk into a room, and you can leave a room the same way. So if the state you have been living in is the state of being overlooked, of waiting, of pleading silently with a phone, you are not doomed to it. You were simply standing in it, unaware another room stood open just beside it. Think of a man who spent years believing he was simply the kind of person others forgot. He did not blame the woman who stopped calling. He blamed himself quietly in the dark. And so every new person who entered his life somehow, eventually, forgot him too. Until one evening he stopped asking why he kept being forgotten, and asked instead what state he had been faithfully occupying. And the answer humbled him. He had been living, night after night, in the feeling of being unimportant, so he began, gently, to feel instead the simple warmth of being remembered, not chasing any one name, just resting in the feeling itself, and slowly, the calls started coming again, from people he had almost forgotten, because he had changed the room he was standing in, and everyone who could still hear him found him there. So it is not the person you need to summon, it is the room inside yourself you need to enter. This week, the next time you catch yourself checking a phone, refreshing a feed, watching a door, stop, and instead of reaching for the object, reach inward for the feeling. Sit for even 60 seconds and feel as though you are already spoken to kindly, already wanted, already chosen. That 60 seconds is worth more than 1,000 refreshes, because you are quietly becoming the state the object must eventually mirror. The phone was never the source of your peace. It was only ever a messenger, and messengers only deliver what has already been decided upstream. So the real work happens far from any screen, in the quiet room of your own feeling. And once you stop confusing the person with the state, the very next key shows you why that person moves at all. I marry the feeling now, not the person outside me. The second key is this: everyone is you pushed out, and there is a story worth telling here, because it goes right to the heart of what you came to this video for. In one of his lectures, a person in the audience pressed Neville Goddard hard on this very question. They said, "But what about the other person's free will? Can I really manifest one specific person into loving me?" And Neville Goddard's answer made the room go silent. He did not soften it. He said, "There is no other person. Everyone is you pushed out." And for a moment, nobody in that room breathed, because they understood, in that instant, that the person they had been begging, arguing with, chasing, was never separate from their own consciousness at all. The specific person you long for is appearing to you as a character in the great dream, but the script that character follows is written by your own assumptions about yourself. If you carry a self-concept of being unwanted, the world, which can only mirror consciousness, will keep producing people who confirm it. And if you carry a self-concept of being cherished, the world has no choice but to rearrange its cast to agree with you. A man waits for one particular reply and receives instead a short, cool answer, and he calls that proof. But Neville Goddard would ask him gently, "Proof of what?" The reply was never a verdict handed down by an outside judge. It was a mirror, obedient, exact, showing him back the very coolness he has been quietly assuming about himself in that relationship. Change the assumption, and the mirror has no coolness left to reflect. Picture a hall of mirrors at some old fairground, and one particular mirror keeps twisting your reflection into something small and sad. You could spend years polishing that mirror, pleading with it, rearranging the lighting around it, and none of it would matter, because the distortion was never in the glass at all. It was in what you brought to stand before it. This is exactly what happens when you fix your attention on convincing one person to feel differently toward you. You are polishing the mirror instead of correcting the figure standing in front of it. And the figure standing in front of every mirror in your life is your own self-concept, nothing more, nothing less. Think of a young man who kept meeting distance wherever he turned, a friend who stopped calling, a father who stayed quiet at dinner, a woman he loved who seemed to look through him. He believed for years that he simply attracted people who withdrew. And one night he finally asked himself, not what is wrong with them, but what have I been assuming is true of me? The honest answer came slowly. He had been carrying, since childhood, the quiet conviction that he was too much trouble to stay close to. So he began, deliberately, to assume the opposite, feeling, before sleep, the ordinary warmth of being easy to love. And within a season, without one dramatic conversation, the same father began lingering at the table. The same woman began looking straight at him again. Nothing outside him had been argued with or persuaded. The mirror had simply been given a new face to reflect. The outer people were never the source of the coldness. They were only ever reporting it back faithfully, the way a lake reports back the shape of the shore. And let this widen a little further, because Neville Goddard was not only describing the person you long for, he was describing every face that has ever appeared before you the coworker who is short with you, the stranger who cuts you off in traffic, the friend who forgets your birthday. Every one of them is you pushed out, wearing a different coat. So the training you do here, in this one relationship, quietly reshapes every relationship you have, because you are not fixing one mirror in the hall. You are changing the one figure who walks past every mirror in the building. This is why Neville Goddard could say, with such quiet certainty, that there is no other person to convince. So it is not the other person who needs to change first. It is the self you are being that the other person is only ever reflecting back to you. And once that silence he left in that room settles into you, you stop begging the mirror and start correcting the face. The world can only answer the self I claim to be. The third key is this. You must learn to live in the end. Not the end as some far-off future you are hoping will arrive, but the end as a present-tense reality you step into now, in your imagination, and hold there until it hardens into fact. Neville Goddard taught that the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the entire secret. Not affirming words about the future, not hoping at the future, but feeling now exactly as you would feel if the specific reunion, the specific message, the specific embrace had already happened. And I want you to notice the difference between hoping and living in the end. Because most people mistake one for the other and wonder why nothing moves. Hoping stands outside a locked door and wishes it would open. Living in the end walks through the door as though it has always stood open. Hoping says someday, living in the end says now. And the whole of manifesting a specific person turns on which of those two postures you are quietly practicing in the small, unnoticed minutes of your day. Think of a woman who wanted, more than anything, to hear a certain man say a particular sentence to her. She had heard it in her imagination 1,000 times, but she had always heard it as a future event, something that would happen out there, someday, if things went well. And Neville Goddard would have told her gently that someday is not a tense imagination recognizes. Imagination only knows now. So she began, instead, to hear that sentence as something already spoken, not waiting to be spoken, already spoken. She would sit quietly in the evening and simply remember it. The way you remember a kindness someone once said to you, not straining toward it, just resting in the warm certainty of having already received it. And something in the tightness of her waiting began, slowly, to loosen. Because you cannot strain toward a memory, you can only enjoy one. Now let's walk through what living in the end actually looks like across one ordinary day. Because the specific is always one in ordinary hours, not in dramatic ones. You wake up, and before your feet touch the floor, you spend 3 or 4 minutes lying still, feeling the warmth of already being loved by this person. Not narrating it in words, just feeling it, the way you would feel the sun on your face, at breakfast, instead of scrolling and checking whether they have reached out. You let your mind wander for 1 full minute into a small imagined scene, perhaps the two of you laughing about something small and ordinary, and you feel the ease of that laughter as though it is happening now, at noon. A doubtful thought tries to visit you, the old thought that says it will never happen. And instead of arguing with it, you simply return, gently, to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the way you would return your attention to a road when your car has drifted. In the afternoon, you catch yourself about to tell a coworker the whole discouraging story of the silence between you and this person, and you choose, quietly, to say nothing, because speaking the lack aloud only rehearses the very state you are trying to leave. In the evening, before sleep, you construct one clear, specific scene, perhaps a phone call, perhaps a doorway, perhaps a simple sentence spoken in their voice, and you enter that scene as a participant, not a spectator, feeling it from the inside, and you carry that feeling straight into sleep. That is a full day lived in the end, 4 or 5 small returns to a feeling, nothing dramatic, nothing exhausting, simply a quiet, faithful return, over and over, to the reality you have already claimed. And here is something worth sitting with. Neville Goddard often said that the future is not something you walk toward, it is something you remember. In the same way you remember a face from childhood, you can also remember a face that has not yet appeared in your outer world. If you can feel it as familiar rather than as foreign, You have already crossed the only bridge that ever needed crossing. This is why he taught that the wise do not ask when will it happen, they simply live already inside the answer, and the world, having no argument against a settled consciousness, eventually rearranges itself to agree. And notice something gentle here. This is not a technique reserved for the spiritually advanced. A child does this naturally. A child who has been promised a trip to the ocean does not wonder whether the ocean is real. The child simply lives, for days beforehand, inside the feeling of sand and salt water, chattering about it at dinner as though it has already happened. That unguarded, unquestioning certainty is exactly the posture Neville Goddard was asking grown, wounded, doubting adults to return to. Pause for a moment right now and pick one real scene with your specific person, something small, a greeting, a touch, a returned message, something you could believe if you saw it, and hold that single scene gently in your mind before you keep listening, not as a hope reaching forward, but as a memory resting quietly behind you. Because a vague longing changes nothing, but one clear, believable scene, felt as already so, becomes the very seed the third key plants in you. And once that seed is planted, the next key is what protects it from being dug up again by your own doubt. The fourth key is this. You must persist in the assumption even while the evidence of your senses insists otherwise. Neville Goddard called this walking the razor's edge between the assumption and the appearance. And it is here that most people quietly lay down the very manifestation they were 1 week away from holding. Notice how ordinary this collapse looks. It never announces itself as failure. It disguises itself as being realistic. Imagine a man who has spent 7 days faithfully feeling the warmth of a reconciliation with someone specific, waking gently into it, carrying it through his afternoons, falling asleep inside it at night, and then, on the 8th evening, he opens his phone and sees a photograph, that very person, laughing, radiant, clearly moving on without him, and something in his chest drops. His mind says, "See, it was never true," and in that one unguarded moment, he is a breath away from handing the whole week back to the appearance. This is the edge Neville Goddard was naming. Not some rare dramatic test, but this small, forgettable moment that visits everyone who has ever assumed anything worth having. Look closely at what is happening here. Neville Goddard taught that facts are the fluid product of a fixed assumption, meaning the photograph is not the truth of the matter, it is only the current shadow cast by whichever assumption still dominates his consciousness. If he lets the shadow speak louder than the assumption he has fed all week, he hands the pen back to the very evidence he was trying to rewrite. Not because the appearance was ever stronger than imagination, but because he stopped feeding imagination the moment it mattered most. This is where revision becomes your quiet weapon, not argument, not explaining the photograph away. Simply this: that same night, lying still, he closes his eyes and rewrites the day as it should have gone, a message instead of a photograph, a kind word instead of silence, and he feels that revised version until it feels more real to him than the memory itself. Neville Goddard was never asking anyone to deny what happened. He was teaching that the outer fact is negotiable because it was only ever consciousness solidified, and consciousness can be respoken. Do this quietly, night after night. Whenever an appearance tries to shout louder than your feeling, revise it, feel it as real, and let that be your only argument. Slowly, the appearances line up behind the assumption instead of against it. The photograph stops mattering, not because it disappears, but because it no longer feeds on your belief. Most people do not fail because their imagination is too weak. They fail because they let the appearance cast the final vote in a matter imagination had already settled. But I want to be honest with you. Persistence like this cannot be muscled through by willpower alone. Gritting your teeth rarely holds for long. There is a deeper chamber where this same assumption stops being an effort you perform and becomes simply what is quietly true of you, without strain, without daily battling the evidence at all. And that chamber, patient one, is exactly where we are going next. I hold my assumptions steady while the world catches up to it. The fifth key is this, and it is the deepest one. So let it unfold slowly, in several movements, the way a piece of music unfolds, each returning to the same note but carrying you further down into it. The first movement is the state akin to sleep. Neville Goddard taught that your most impressionable moment is the moment right before sleep, when the body has grown still and drowsy, but the mind has not yet lost its wakeful control of imagination. In this half-asleep condition, the outer world grows faint. The clock stops mattering, and whatever you feel with conviction here sinks past the reasoning mind and settles into what he called your subconscious, the very ground from which your outer life springs. So tonight, do not fall asleep scrolling. Do not fall asleep rehearsing the very lack you want to leave behind. Let your body grow heavy and calm, breathing slow, until you feel that pleasant nearness to sleep where words stop forming in sharp sentences. This is different from ordinary daydreaming, which skims the surface and is easily interrupted. This drowsy hour goes underneath, the way a stone sinks rather than skips, and it is only what sinks that takes root. If your mind feels too busy to grow drowsy quickly, do not fight it. Simply lie still a little longer and let the noise exhaust itself. The doorway opens on its own timing, not on force. The second movement, once resting in that drowsy state, is to enter one small, specific scene with the one you desire. Not a vague wash of feeling, but one clear scene, implying the wish fulfilled. A hand reaching for yours. A familiar voice saying your name the way it used to. A message glowing on a screen. The scene must be small enough to believe, because a scene too large collapses under its own disbelief. Think of a man estranged from his father for years. Cold silence between them. He did not imagine some grand, tearful reconciliation that felt too far. Instead, each night he imagined something smaller. His father's voice on the phone simply saying his name, easy, unremarkable, and because it was small enough to believe, it was strong enough to hold. A woman wanting a certain friend to reach out did not imagine a long conversation. She simply imagined the small buzz of a message arriving and the warmth of seeing that one familiar name. So you, too, select one small doorway and step into it as a participant, seeing it through your own eyes, feeling the temperature of the room, the sound of the voice against your ear. If you notice yourself watching from outside like a spectator, gently correct it. Locate the vantage point of your own two eyes inside the scene, because the wish must be entered, not observed. Entering it is what makes it yours. The third movement is repetition, not once, but night after night, the same small scene, felt with the same quiet conviction, until it stops feeling performed and starts feeling remembered. It is not the intensity of one dramatic night that does the work. It is the faithfulness of many quiet ones. The man imagining his father's voice felt no great breakthrough on the first night. Or the fifth, he simply returned, unhurried, until by the 20th night the scene felt worn smooth, like a favorite chair that knows the shape of you. Familiarity is what convinces the subconscious of reality, not force. So let this comfort you rather than burden you. You are only required to return. Think of how a lullaby works on a child, sung softly, the same few notes, night after night, until the child's body relaxes at the very first sound of it. Your scene becomes that lullaby, and even sung tiredly, a lullaby still puts the child to sleep. The feeling does not need to be dramatic every night. It only needs to be sincere. The fourth movement is the actual walkthrough, so you can use it tonight, when you lie down. Spend 2 or 3 minutes relaxing every part of the body, starting at the feet, moving slowly upward, unhurried. Then, once drowsy, choose your one small scene and move through it 3 or 4 times, each pass briefer and more natural, until on the final pass you barely need the details. You simply feel the warmth of it as accomplished fact, the way you feel a fire's warmth without describing the flames. And let that feeling be the very last thing your mind touches before sleep takes you. Do not check your phone after. Do not speak to anyone after. Protect that feeling the way you would shield a small candle carried through a doorway into wind, because a state entered before sleep and immediately broken by contrary talk loses much of its power to sink in. The seed is planted in that last soft moment, and disturbing the soil right after undoes in 90 seconds what an hour built. There is a quiet companion to this. The moment of waking also carries some of this softness. Before the phone is reached for, a brief return to the same feeling there seals shut what the night has already opened. And if you forget, simply catch the next quiet moment you can find. The door is rarely as narrow as fear makes it seem. There is one more piece, and it is patience without anxiety. Some nights the scene will feel vivid, other nights your mind will wander, and on those nights you simply, without scolding yourself, bring it back. The return itself is the discipline, not perfection. Neville Goddard never taught flawless feeling every night. He taught faithful return, the way water returns to its own level no matter how many times it is disturbed. If you lose the scene on a Tuesday, you are not behind. You have simply been given another Wednesday. This same drowsy hour is where the man calling his father's voice into memory eventually stopped needing to imagine it at all, because one ordinary afternoon, weeks later, without ceremony, the phone rang and it was his father, saying his name exactly as he had heard it in that soft, sleepy hour so many nights before. The outer world can only mirror what has been felt as true within. The phone call was not the cause. The drowsy hour was the cause. The call was only the echo, and notice how ordinary that echo was. No thunder, just a ringing phone on a Tuesday afternoon. This is almost always how the fulfilled wish arrives. Quietly, wearing ordinary clothes. So do not wait for fireworks. Wait instead for the ordinary moment that happens to carry exactly what you asked for. So tonight, when you lie down, remember this. You are not performing a technique. You are quietly rehearsing a homecoming, and the more faithfully you rehearse it in that soft, believing hour, the sooner the outer world has no choice but to catch up to what you have already, secretly, tenderly, made true within. I fall asleep in the feeling already true, and I let that feeling do the work. The sixth key is this, and it is the gentlest one, so let it land softly, once you have assumed the feeling, once you have lived in the end, once you have persisted through the appearances and fallen asleep faithfully in the state akin to sleep, there is nothing left for you to do but rest in the awareness of I am. Neville Goddard taught that I am is the very presence of God in you, the pure awareness of being, untouched by whether the phone rings today or tomorrow, and the moment you grip too tightly, checking, measuring, demanding proof on your own timeline, you have quietly slipped out of the state and back into begging. So the sixth key simply asks you to loosen your hands, not your feeling, only your grip. Feel the fulfillment, then let your I am rest in the quiet certainty that what has been assumed within must appear without. The way a seed planted in good soil does not need to be dug up daily to prove it is growing. Think of a gardener who plants in the spring. She does not kneel over the soil each morning pulling at the roots to see if they have taken hold. She waters, she tends, and then she trusts the dark, unseen work happening beneath the surface. This is precisely the posture Neville Goddard was pointing to when he spoke of I am, not idleness, not carelessness, but a settled trust that the unseen is already at work, and that trust itself is what allows the unseen to finish its work undisturbed. Think of the silence that fell over that room when Neville Goddard said, "There is no other person. Everyone is you pushed out." That same silence is available to you right now, not as a strange teaching from long ago, but as your own quiet knowing. The arguing stops, the checking softens, and what remains is simply, I am, resting, certain, at peace. While the outer world does what it has always done, faithfully mirror whatever has been assumed, and if there is one gift this sixth key gives you above all the others, it is rest, real rest, the kind that does not need daily proof. The kind that has already stopped negotiating with appearances because it has remembered where the true power has always lived. I am at peace, and what I have assumed is already appearing. Here is the whole picture. It is not the person you were ever meant to chase. It is the state that person merely reflects. It is not their will you needed to bend. It is your own self-concept you needed to correct. It is not the far-off future you needed to hope toward. It is the end you needed to feel now, as already true. It is not willpower that holds an assumption steady. It is faithful, undramatic persistence and revision, night after night. It is not effort that seals a feeling into fact. It is the drowsy, believing rest of the state akin to sleep. And it is not gripping that lets it appear. It is the quiet, unclenched certainty of I am, 6 keys, and yet only one recognition underneath them all. The one you have been reaching for was never outside of you, and the reaching itself was the only thing standing between you and the room. Say it with me one last time. I am worthy of the love I have been wanting. I am already united in feeling with the one I desire. Imagination creates my reality, and if that same quiet fell over you just now that once fell over that whole room, let it stay, because the silence Neville Goddard left behind was never an ending. It was an invitation, and you have just walked through it, still, unhurried, and completely at home in the one who was never really someone else at all.